Hello, Gavin here, welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at using reverb pedals. So reverb is an effect widely used on most instruments, whether it be the studio or in a live setting. And although it's not something bass players commonly use, it can make some great sounds on the bass. So today we're going to use 3 different reverb pedals, looking at some different styles of the effect, and answering some of your questions that you've left me on Instagram all about using it. So let's get stuck into that now. So first up, what is reverb? Well, reverb is an effect that adds ambience to your sound, whether it be a hall or room effect, which is commonly found in pedals, or plate or spring reverbs, which can either be the units themselves or pedals which emulate those sounds. We'll also find modern style reverbs which have pitch shifting in the background that create these large ethereal sounds. So today we're going to look at all of those, and we'll also look at using overdrive in some of the clips as well, because that pairs with reverb really well. The overdrive of choice today is the Gojira Mr. Sparkle, which is a tube screamer style overdrive, but with a bass mod to make it work really well with a bass guitar. And in the first clip you heard one of those reverb pedals. That was the Fender Marine Layer, which is a really cool reverb. You heard that on a hall setting with and without the overdrive, and that was using the Squier 54 jazz bass with round wound strings, and I was just using the bridge pickup. And this is something you do have to think about with reverb. You see, if you don't tame the low end, reverb pedals can become very muddy and very cluttered sounding. So you have to be careful of your note choice, but also the sound you set up around that pedal. For that clip, the pre-delay was turned all the way off, the reverb time was set about a quarter of the way up, the damping was all the way up, and so was the level. We were also using variation 2 on the switch, and the filter was turned off. And this all created a really nice ambient texture. But we're going to do something very different for the next clip. For the next clip we're using a spring reverb setting, and we're doing this on the T.Rex Roommate Jr. This is a really cool pedal for spring reverb sounds. I highly recommend checking this one out for those types of sounds. And for today we've got the decay set just under half, with the mix set about half as well, the level cranked up, and the gain control set just to match my settings. But when I did this using the same bass, both pickups on this time, and palm muting and using a pick, it was great for recreating those rockabilly, rock and roll, surf style sounds that guitar players commonly use, but it works really well on bass. So let's have a look at that now so you can see how that sounds. For the next clip, we're really going to dive into the ambient sounds. This is how we create those massive soundscape ambient sounds. And for that we're using a different reverb again. We're going to use the G.Labs Spectral reverb. For this it's got 3 controls. The time is set just over half, as is the effect itself, And then we've got the wet dry mix completely wet, so it's all of the effect added into your sound. This creates that synth pad sound with the pitch shifting underneath the bass. Again, for this one I'm using the Squier 54 Jazz, but I'm turning the neck pickup off again because this really can get away from you if you don't control your sound going into it. And again, just like the first two clips, we'll add in the overdrive towards the end so you can see how that adds to the sound. So let's have a listen to that one now. I'm going to change things up a little bit now, and I'm going to spend some time answering some of your questions. These were left over on my Instagram, and thank you very much to everyone that left questions. I really appreciate that. But if you still have questions after this video, please leave them down in the comments because I'd love to see all your questions. So first up we'll have the question, is there a difference between delay, echo and reverb? And that's a good question. Delay and echo are very similar, they're actually really the same thing. Reverb's a little bit different. Delay and echo are really just repeats of what you play. So you play a note in and you set the time and the effect itself so that it repeats in a certain way. Reverb's more of an ambient layer put around what you play. You do occasionally get a slight delay of what happens, especially if you turn the dry sound off. But really it's more of the feel of being in a large room or something like that, or a Springer plate reverb, as opposed to having echoes and repeats. So both are really cool and they actually pair up really well. And the next question is, what about natural reverb from a large building or concert hall? How can we be aware of what an audience might actually hear from your original clean sound? And that's actually a really important thing to think about. This is where sound checks come in really handy, because if you can sound check with an empty building, that's as much reverb as you'll actually get naturally from the building. Once you add people into the mix in the audience, the reverb reduces because it's got things to bounce off of and be absorbed by. So really if you're sound checking and you're finding there's loads of reverb, you might want to turn your reverb on your pedal board down a little bit, so it's not too much reverb being added. But just know that if it's a controlled amount of reverb during sound check, when you actually add people into the building, that's going to reduce even more. So the next question is, there are pedals for reverb, so when would it be more significant or appropriate to use a rack-based reverb? That's a good question, because both are really useful. The difference can also be though that rack gear is often line level, and some of it is expecting to see a balanced signal, which your guitar is neither. The instrument level is going to be very different to that, and is typically an unbalanced signal. So you have to convert your signal to suit that. That can easily be done though, and rack gear can be great when combined with your guitar rig or your bass rig. Pedals on the other hand suit your guitar rig really well, but can actually sometimes be difficult to use in a studio setting if you want to run vocals through them, things like that. You have to reamp your signal through it so that it's the right type of signal going in. So both can be used, you just have to set your signals up right, and they'll sound very different. So highly recommend checking out different types of gear and seeing what works best for you. The next question is, can you usefully add reverb to reverb when chaining pedals together? And this is a good point actually, because I even for this video ran the 3 reverbs together and it made this really massive pad sound, like a synth layer. But that could easily have been very muddy. I had to set the levels to suit each pedal running into the other. So yeah, it can sound great. And really there's no right or wrong with this, you find the sounds that suit what you're doing. So there's nothing to stop you running multiple reverbs, just like you could run multiple overdrives, multiple delays, things like that. You just have to set the sound up for what you're wanting. And there's no right or wrong, so try it out and see how you get on. And lastly we have the question, does it gent? Guess we just have to check it out and see if it can. Well, I don't know if that was gent, but it definitely can work in a heavier rock setting. So lastly, we have a fretless clip, and we're going to go back to the Fender marine layer for this one. We're going to use the room setting, but we're going to leave the controls exactly as they were for the last clip we used it on. So that was on the hall setting at the start of the video. Even without changing the controls and just changing to that room setting, it does change up the sound. And with the fretless, it adds to that vocal quality you get from the fretless. Again, I'm just using the bridge pickup because this is more of a lead sound, but it works really well. Before we play that, I just wanted to give you some final thoughts on using reverb. For me, I think reverb's a really useful effect. When you're playing solo bass work or melodic lines, it can be really good as a final touch to make it sound really nice. You do, of course, as I said, have to be careful of low end. You have to make sure it's not muddy or too cluttered sounding. But if you take the time to balance these things out, you can get some really cool effects with reverb. And I highly recommend all three of these reverb pedals. They're all really good. Of course, there are settings on them that we haven't used because this video would have been easily an hour long if I went into everything. But even just these individual sounds we've used, they're all really cool sounds and all very usable. So I highly recommend checking these pedals out. But of course, this is all just my opinion. I'd love to hear what you think about this. So let me know in the comments what your favourite sound was, or how you're using reverb, because I'd love to hear what you're all doing. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit like and subscribe down below, clicking the bell icon to be notified of more content when it comes out. And until next time, keep working on those bass faces.